It's a program to recognize your community's leadership in taking clean energy actions. So, and the program has, over the years, has adapted to really meet the needs of your communities by, for instance, offering no cost share to the grants and so forth, and by offering coordinator support, because we found that municipalities all expressed that they had limited time, limited capacity to undertake these kinds of projects. So clean energy community coordinators can help you in every step of the way to implementing projects. We have, as I mentioned, coordinator support, which is at no cost to you. It's free, paid by New York State. We can provide resources, toolkits to assist in projects like your LED streetlights or HVAC upgrades to your buildings or whatnot. We work with you to determine what actions is right for your community. Right, it's different in every town and village, and we are able to present on the program to any of your stakeholders, assist with CEC grant applications, really whatever you need. We're there to assist. We attend board meetings. We help with finding funding or financing opportunities to help with projects that are different from that. These are state programs, federal programs. Sometimes local funding opportunities. We really work to help you make these actions happen. So the way the leadership round works is NYSERDA has listed a number of high impact actions. These are prescriptive actions that NYSERDA has identified have high impacts on, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce our energy consumption, save money. By completing these actions, your municipality will earn points that unlock, the pathway to grants, and help to receive recognition for your actions. There are a lot of actions that you can take. This slide is just going to list what they are, but you don't have to memorize them. And just to give you an idea that there's a lot of things that your community can do. Some of them you might have already even done. So the different grants that are available, there are action grants for completing particular actions that are on that list. There are designation grants that are available once your community completes any 4 actions on the list. And then there are points-based grants. As you complete more and more actions after your designation grant, after you complete 4, you're still building points, and as you reach point thresholds, then you access further grants. And most of our communities in the North Country are considered small communities, meaning under 40,000 population. And so, but even so, the grants, if you do as many actions as you can get you up to $100,000 worth of funding. So it's not, it is significant. If you'd like to learn more about the program, the website is at the bottom, nyserda.ny.gov/CEC. But I also encourage you to get in touch with me as one of your Clean Energy Communities coordinators, and I'd be happy to speak with you, your whole board, your supervisor, your mayor, anybody that's interested in the program. I'm happy to explain what that is. So, and my email address is on many of the emails that have gone to you, about tonight's or other presentations. So let's see if I can stop sharing. There we go. I think I got out of it. So that's a little bit about Clean Energy Communities. And that is the, through this program is why we have tonight's series of webinars. I'd like to introduce Jason Fotenhauer at this time. Jason, are you on the? Hi,
Nancy. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
There you are. Sorry. So many little squares. Jason's from St. Lawrence County. I just wanted to say a couple words about why these programs are important.
Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate it. My name is Jason Fotenhauer. I'm the planning director in St. Lawrence County. And I see there just a great cross section of individuals representing a lot of different communities in the North Country, and that's great to see. We've just maybe two things. I want to talk a little bit about CEC because St. Lawrence County was a recipient of a CEC award a couple of years ago, I think 2019, and was able to use it for some upgrades to lighting throughout the county. So really helpful for energy conservation. And we are very appreciative of that. And I know the program has changed quite a bit. This leadership component is different from when we were going through it, but it is it's a useful program, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile. Second thing I just want to talk about, I know the topic tonight is comprehensive plans, and I know Candace is going to talk a lot about that, but just wanted to maybe preface the discussion about comprehensive plans with the idea that comp plans are really at the heart of community and good land use planning. We see a lot of comprehensive plans in our county that are very old, and some municipalities have had the opportunity to update them, and that's great. But many have not been updated yet, and so many of them don't have any clean energy language in them. And so if you have a community or a comprehensive plan and you're thinking of updating it, then this is a great session to get going on that. You know, there are a lot of challenges. There's a cost associated with it, and time, of course. But the comprehensive plan is really at the heart of good planning. So really excited about this session, and can't wait to hear what Candace has to say. So thank you, Nancy.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And this is a fairly informal, I mean, there'll be a formal presentation, but informal in that as you have questions, please enter them in the chat, and that'll allow Candace the chance to answer them either during her presentation or afterwards. You know, as long as they're in the chat, well, we won't miss them. We are recording tonight's webinar, and we'll make the recording and the slides available to folks afterwards. So if you miss anything, you can catch it then as well. And I think that's enough for introductions, besides introducing Candace Rossi from NYSERDA, who's here to give us our presentation tonight. So thanks, Candace.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone see my screen all right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here tonight, and also thank you for everyone who's attending. My name is Candace Rossi, and I'm a senior project manager at NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And I work on the clean energy siting team. So tonight I will be delivering our Clean Energy and New York Comprehensive Plan course, kicking off this great webinar series. This course will consider opportunities and steps for evaluating and incorporating community sustainability and clean energy goals into their comprehensive plans. The material we covered today is also available as a resource on our website, and I'll actually throw that into the chat now in case anybody wants to follow along more directly. All right, so I just put that. That's just a link to our comprehensive plan and clean energy guidance document available on our website. So before we get started, I wanted to provide you with a brief agenda for this course and walk through the topics we will be covering. So we will start out initially with an overview of clean energy in New York State to create some sort of baseline of understanding of what is happening currently. And then we'll also cover comprehensive planning on the whole. I will note that this is a clean energy and your comprehensive plan course. If you have more general or clean energy related inquiries about comprehensive planning, the Department of State is the right place to go. So we'll have some more links for them within the presentation, so you can ask more questions if they aren't clean energy related. And next, we're going to combine the clean energy material and the comprehensive planning material we covered to talk about how we can go about incorporating clean energy provisions into comprehensive plans. And then we'll have some resources at the end of the presentation that we want to make sure that everyone is aware of. So like I said, my name is Candace Rossi, and I'm a senior project manager at NYSERDA on the clean energy siting team. Some of you on this webinar may be familiar with my team. We work directly with local governments across the state who are managing clean energy developments in their jurisdictions. So we develop resources and work directly with communities across the state on issues relating to clean energy. You can see on this screen the 4 guidebooks we currently have published. And that's, like I had put in the chat, the Clean Energy in Your Comprehensive Plan guidance. Then we have the New York Solar Guidebook, the New York Battery Energy Storage Guidebook, as well as the New York Wind Energy Guidebook. So those are all available on our website, which I can provide another link to in the chat as well. So you guys have access to that. All right. So like I said, tonight we'll be going over the Clean Energy and Your Comprehensive Plan guidebook, and definitely recommend that you take a deeper look at the guide itself as well as the other guidebooks. A little more about our team. So we're happy to meet with you in your town if you have any questions regarding clean energy, or host county-wide workshops, kind of like we're doing tonight. So most generally, I want you to take this as an introduction to our team, as we're here to help you along the way as you work through clean energy projects in your jurisdiction, specifically if you're looking to adopt laws or really any question you may have. On the link I also put in the chat, you can request technical assistance or submit questions via that website as well. So it's a good website to remember as you're working through these projects. We are also consistently looking at what and how to develop resources to be best utilized by local governments. We don't want to just put out a fact sheet and say, here you go, have fun. We want to provide you with actual tools and templates that can be implemented on the local level, to be in line with your community's character. So like I said, we're happy to be a resource for you in your town, and please take this as an introduction. And if you ask a question and I don't have the immediate answer, we're happy to go back and do the research and try to get something over to you as well. So with that, we're going to start into our first agenda item tonight, which is the overview of clean energy in New York State, to just create that baseline of understanding. So the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is also referred to as the Climate Act, was signed into law in 2019 and demonstrates New York's strong commitment to fighting climate change, transforming our economy, and building resilient communities. It also serves as the backbone of the state's current clean energy goals, such as having New York's electric load being supplied by 70% renewable energy by 2030 and to be 100% emissions-free by 2040. These are also followed up with aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals. So that's also 40% reduction by 2030 and 85% reduction by 2050. Additionally, there's also technology-specific goals, which you can see here on the screen. So one of them is having 10,000 megawatts of distributed solar by 2030, 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035, and a 3,000 megawatt goal of energy storage by 2030, with the interim goal of 1,500 megawatts by 2025. I want to also call attention to the graph on the bottom of the slide. This shows the sources our electricity is currently being supplied from, or also known as the energy mix that we have. So this chart here is only from 1980 to 2017. And these are the share of each different electric generation source. So you can see that coal plays a larger role in the 80s and starts to phase out in the aughts, and then it's largely taken over by natural gas. Also, an interesting note is this graph only goes to 2017. So nuclear is going to play an outsized role in this graph specifically. than it does now because of the Indian Point decommissioning process, phasing out that large nuclear facility in Westchester. So nuclear will be playing a diminishing role in our energy mix. I think it's important to show that we never really got our energy from one source. It's always been a mix of sources and will continue to be a mix. And then you can see the green bar in the middle, which is the renewable energy bar, which is inclusive of different sources. So that includes solar and wind. So to provide a bit of a basis for the presentation today, here are some different types of solar energy that are most commonly used. We have solar photovoltaics. So this converts sunlight directly into electricity and have been around for decades. Then we have the concentrated solar power technologies, which use mirrors to reflect and concentrate sunlight onto a receiver. And then the energy from the sunlight heats a high temperature fluid and basically creates thermal energy. This tends to be quite expensive and really isn't prevalent in New York State. And then there's also solar thermal. So you've probably seen this more on the smaller scale. So solar thermal generation systems collect and concentrate sunlight to produce the high temperature heat needed to generate electricity. So coming back to solar PV, which you are probably all most familiar with, and is really the focus of the technology tonight, there are two major categories of solar installations: distributed generation and utility scale, which is also referred to at NYSERDA, like our large scale renewables program, or LSR. So distributed generation includes residential installations, commercial installations, as well as community solar, and tend to be behind the meter and have to have a customer or an off-taker. So residential solar is pretty straightforward, and this is installed on your home and provides power directly to offset your usage. Commercial projects are larger and are typically installed for commercial use. So this can take place as a commercial system that, say, your Target or another larger retailer has installed on their roof. And then we also have community solar, which I'm sure most of you have been hearing more of recently. So community solar recently is the most prevalent form of distributed solar in New York State, and it allows for residents and businesses to subscribe to a solar project and receive the benefits and credits without having to install the project directly on their property. So like I said, community solar is a prevalent model as it allows for people who previously were unable to take advantage of solar to actually become an off-taker of a community solar project. And then there's utility scale or front of the meter solar, which sends its production right to the grid. So this does not have a specific customer or off-taker. But these projects usually start around the size of 20 megawatts. And like I said, the production is sent directly to the ISO, the independent system operator who runs our grid. And especially since a lot of planning and zoning is thought of in size, I think it's a good metric to keep in mind that for ground mounted systems, it's really around 5 to 7 acres per megawatt. Depending on the system design and the facility area, and that can power, each megawatt can power 100 to 200 homes. So next up, we have a bit of a summary on wind here. The system itself has 3 main components: the rotor, the nacelle, and a tower. And they're numbered here on the first image, so you can see what and where they are on a standard turbine. The rotor blades operate under the same principle as airplane wings. So one side of the blade is curved and the other side is flat. The wind flows more quickly along the curved edge, creating a difference in pressure on either side of the blade, which causes the blade to be pushed by the air to equalize the pressure difference, causing the blades to turn. The nacelle contains the gears and generator for the turbine. So the blades are connected to the generator by the gears, and the gears convert the blade rotation to the generator rotation, and the generator converts the rotational energy into electrical energy. And then lastly, the tower, which is pretty self-explanatory, is what the blades in the nacelle are mounted on top of. Usually they're anywhere from 100 meters to 200 meters high, And right now the wind industry is going through kind of increasing their capacities. So on the screen is what a 2 to 3 megawatt turbine looks like, which is pretty standard. And then the offshore wind turbines are typically much larger and do generate more power. But we're really focusing on onshore wind today, land-based. And next we have energy storage, which I do see there's a question in the chat. And I think this is referring to the energy storage goals that New York State has, asking if it's meant to be 1,500 megawatt hours. So the goal itself is based in megawatts, not megawatts hours, even though if you are familiar with storage, usually you'll hear the megawatt and the megawatt hour capacity for the project. It just so happens that the goal itself is just based in megawatts. So continuing into what is energy storage. So energy storage or batteries. A battery system is really made up of 3 different components when looking at it. So you have the cell, modules, and the rack. The cells are basically the building blocks of energy storage. And when you wire a bunch of cells together, you get what is called a module, which is the middle image on the top. And then when you wire a bunch of modules together, you get what's called a rack, which is what's on the far right of the screen. So that's just thinking about it in its most basic form. These storage systems all kind of start out as cells, and it's just building them up to the size that is being proposed or developed. So those are just the basic components. And then you also have the battery management system, which is probably the most important part of an energy storage system. The management system is like the eyes, ears, and brain of the system, and is going to monitor different metric thresholds inside the storage system, such as any gases that are being released, maybe the temperature of the cells, and it's also able to send out alarms in the event of a malfunction. It's also able to activate safety protocols within a battery energy storage system unit itself. So this is really an important piece of the overall energy storage systems. And if you are signing in to the rest of the webinar series, there are 2 other presentations that are much more specific on energy storage, and we'll get a bit more into the nitty-gritty of all the components and what different purposes they serve. But continuing on this slide, now there are different types of installations. We have residential or commercial, which are typically behind the meter installations, serving a local electricity load, or utility scale, which are in front of the meter. There are also a multitude of uses that storage can provide. Typically, batteries connected directly into the grid and often are paired with renewables. So storage paired with renewables is a very prevalent use, and currently, as it allows for users to store energy from intermittent resources and use it when it's needed. An easy example when thinking about this is when a project is also paired with solar. Energy storage would allow basically the system itself to store that solar energy during the day if it's not being used, and then use it at night when the sun is not shining. So similar when it's paired with wind, you can charge the battery on a particularly windy day and use it when the turbines may not be spinning. Batteries are also great for backup power. Solar alone is not going to ensure your refrigerator still runs in the event of an outage, because usually it's always almost grid connected. But if you do have a battery connected to your solar array, let's say, you might be able to have some critical loads that are powered in the event of an outage. Energy arbitrage is another function of battery. Batteries, basically what you're doing is charging the battery from the grid at night in the middle, like when the energy is really cheap, and then discharge it back on the grid when energy is more expensive, typically during those peak times in the afternoon. So basically a very general buy low, sell high kind of use. And then storage is also useful for grid upgrade deferrals. So what this means is utilities, when they need to upgrade their distribution grid, they will rate base those costs, which means they spread out the costs among ratepayers in their utility territory. So installing larger batteries instead of large costly power plants can defer those grid upgrades and then therefore help stabilize utility bill prices as well. And also energy storage systems can offer a host of other grid services that we don't have time to get into today. But like I mentioned before, those will get more in depth on the 2 energy storage presentations that are part of this workshop series. So as we are discussing the comprehensive plan and more specifically how to incorporate these technologies, land uses, and local considerations into the plan, it's important to recognize that different clean energy technologies have different impacts. So for all the technologies that we've already discussed, solar, wind, and storage, it's appropriate to look at basically their appropriate location and zoning, what is their environmental impact, having those bulk and area standards, decommissioning, and taxation. These all should be taken into consideration when looking at any of your zoning or land use regulations or comprehensive plans. But now when it comes to solar specifically, the impacts tend to have more concerns regarding their visual and agricultural land impacts. So you want to take those into specific consideration when updating anything for solar. When it comes to wind, usually there's more concerns around the visual impact, noise, and shadow flicker. And lastly, energy storage concerns tend to be more centered around fire safety and incident management. So it's just important to take in consideration that these technologies do have different land use considerations when you're looking at them. So they're not all created equal in that aspect. And here we have a quick snapshot of completed distributed energy resources projects in New York State, alongside the actual 2020 production mix in New York State. So we have fossil fuels and nuclear leading the charge at this point, but we'll start to see an increase in renewables and wind and hydro as we continue along. So this kind of just gives you an idea of where in New York we're seeing installations, and these are ones that are just have been installed, so not necessarily ones that are in construction, might be approved on the local level. And maybe they just haven't told us that they've completed their projects. So this just is kind of an outline of where we see a lot of development in New York State. So this is also an important baseline of knowledge to be aware of when you're updating your comprehensive plan. Basically, the permitting processes vary based on the size and technology of the installation itself. So for solar and wind projects under 25 megawatts are permitted at the local level through SEQR, the State Environmental Quality Review, and local laws. Projects over 25 megawatts are permitted at the state level via Article 10, or more recently, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which we shorten to ORES, which you'll probably hear me say a few times. And then projects between 20 and 25 megawatts have the option to opt into the state level permitting process through ORES. So it's also important to note that projects going through the ORES process must obtain a permit from ORES, and prior to issuing a final siting permit, ORES must find that the proposed project complies with any applicable local laws and regulations, except those determined by ORES to be unreasonably burdensome. So applications for these projects must contain a statement clearly identifying any applicable local comprehensive plan, an indication of whether the proposed project is consistent with that plan, as well as a list of all local requirements applicable to that proposed facility. So developers must construct and operate the permitted facilities in accordance with all applicable and local requirements, which are not determined to be unreasonably burdensome. So this is just a highlight of why it's important to update your comprehensive plan, because even if a project is going through the ORES siting process, they will have to take your comprehensive plan into consideration. So it's another way to really get your community's wants out there. And then lastly, for energy storage, storage projects that are paired with large-scale renewable generators, those 20 to 25 megawatt projects, will be permitted at the state level through ORES. But for storage projects that are not paired with large-scale generators, this will be permitted at the local level. So that's also another distinction to be aware of for your comprehensive plan as well as your local laws. All right, so that concludes our clean energy overview section of the presentation, and we will continue along into the comprehensive planning in New York State overview. Like I said previously, NYSERDA is primarily focused on incorporating clean energy into comprehensive plans. So if you have comprehensive planning questions that do not relate to clean energy, the Department of State is the place to go. And we'll have some contact information for DOS at the end of this section as well. So here we have the definition for comprehensive plans that derives from the New York State zoning enabling statutes as amended in 1993. So prior to this, it seems the comprehensive plan was not defined clearly. So here we have that comprehensive plan is defined as materials, written and/or graphic, including but not limited to maps, charts, studies, resolutions, reports, and other descriptive material that identify the goals, objectives, principles, guidelines, policies, standards, devices, and instruments for the immediate and long-range protection, enhancement, and growth and development of the municipality. So there's really a bunch to unpack there in that definition alone. So I wanted to just highlight a few points of that definition. So first off, we have the descriptive material. So in this definition, it's really imperative that material therein accurately describes and captures the character of the jurisdiction in your plan. Then we have the goals, objective, principles, guidelines, policies, standards, devices, and instruments. So really this is showing that the scope of the comprehensive plan reflects that of governing. It's complex, it's multifaceted. And then we have the immediate and long range. So a well-considered comprehensive plan should be one that not only looks to protect which was, but plans for what is, as well as the extent possible what's to come. Although we know comprehensive plans to be dynamic and living documents that are periodically revisited, it is important to be forward thinking as well to minimize conflicts and the needs for revisions and edits. And lastly, we have the section regarding the protection, enhancement, growth, and development. So here you want to recognize that some of these goals are potentially or inherently at odds with one another. So you really have to take balance and consideration into consideration as you're developing your comprehensive plan. So here, which will be a repeated theme, kind of the past, the present, and the future throughout this presentation. We have here the what for comprehensive planning really focuses on what the community looks like now and what it envisions to look like in the future. Then we have the how does the community plan to get there? And the why are those plans or the future worth preserving, protecting, and pursuing? And also comprehensive planning is inherently tied to zoning. So we've also included the enabling statutes here. So depending on which municipality type you're in, this is basically those statutes. And also that land use regulations must be in accordance with a comprehensive plan, so that if you have zoning, if you have land use regulations, you also need to have a comprehensive plan. As an example, if you have zoning or land use regulations in your municipality and you do not have a comprehensive plan that covers clean energy, there is a chance that a renewable energy developer could challenge those regulations in court, and it would leave them vulnerable since they weren't in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So it is really important to develop a comprehensive plan to give your municipality agency and some control over what's happening in the community and what type of development happens and how it happens. So we know what enables comprehensive planning at this point and what it is on a high level, but why is it really so important to do? First on our list, we have the example that I had just given, that your zoning and land use regulations can be vulnerable if they're not in line with your comprehensive plan. Second, we have the consideration by other agencies. So county, state, or federal. In some cases, entities do have immunity from local zoning, but adopting a comprehensive plan can cover some of those bases of the community wants. So I also had touched on this earlier about ORES and how they have to take your local laws and comprehensive plan into consideration when reviewing a permit application. While they are allowed to challenge sections of the law that they might consider overly burdensome, in order for ORES to deem any of these regulations burdensome, they have to be formally challenged by the developer, and then they're going to go to a hearing in front of a judge to decide whether or not to disregard that one section of the law that's been challenged. The rest of the law would still stand, but also having your comprehensive plan and laws accurately reflect your community's wants ensures that this will be taken into consideration seriously, even if the permitting authority lies at a higher level. Next, another reason why it's important is to ensure that planning is not responsive to development. If you haven't already updated your comprehensive plan, it's important to start sooner than later. So you're not just reacting to development in your jurisdiction. So you want to get ahead of that so you're able to lay out what you anticipate in your community. The comprehensive plan also acts as clear communication to developers of what you expect from a clean energy project in your jurisdiction and what is important to you. And it also allows for the documentation of the community's past, present, and future. It's also a living document that is usually revisited every 10 years or so. And it's also a bit of a time capsule for your community's characters at that time as well. So here we have some key considerations for comprehensive planning in New York. It's important to consider documenting, studying, and understanding existing conditions such as land uses and resources to be able to create a plan that is really all-encompassing of your community. You'll want to solicit and obtain community input to ensure that all voices are heard. Also, you want to adhere to a consistent process and structure, identify clear goals, select and define objectives and strategies, and develop implementation plans. We'll go through all of these 3 bullets a bit more in detail later in the presentation, but right now I'll touch a little bit more on funding. When we first started our comprehensive plan guidebook development that was released last December, we asked folks throughout the state, as well as consultants, how much does it cost to modify or develop a comprehensive plan? And the range that we got was anywhere from $10,000 to $250,000, so a pretty astronomical range. And the reason for that is that if you're just doing a little update or a planned update to a comprehensive plan, most things have usually stayed the same, or you just need to adjust a thing or two. It's not going to cost very much money. But if you're starting from scratch, building a comprehensive plan from a blank page, that can cost quite a bit. And just getting the necessary expertise on board, such as hiring those consultants, staff time for your agencies, all the wonderful stuff. So that comprehensive planning can cost some money. But the good news is that there are grants that are tied to comprehensive planning that will help you pay for those costs, if not cover those costs completely, depending on how much of an update you're doing. So there's a whole section on funding in the comprehensive planning guidebook. So if folks are looking to start the comp plan from zero, I definitely recommend to find some funding for your efforts. Definitely check out the NYSERDA guidebook. And I think at the end of this presentation, I might have some additional links as well that will be shared. So comprehensive planning should be a proactive versus a reactive exercise. This goes out to the community input piece. It's much easier in the grand scheme of things to reach out and get people's input before making decisions than it is to make decisions and then deal with a lot of upset people potentially. So you really want to engage people in the community early and often so that you don't have some disgruntled residents in a town hall meeting. So this slide is really just representing the difference between a board meeting that might have had some more proactive comp planning versus what a meeting might look like that might be facing a controversial application. So just really encouraging for local officials to be proactive in their comprehensive planning. So finally, here are some of the comprehensive planning resources that I had mentioned earlier from the Department of State. And I can also be sure to share these links as well with our organizers to be able to send out. So yeah, so this is the New York State Department of State Division of Local Government Service. So they have events of their local government training schedule, which you may be familiar with. And they also have a zoning and your comprehensive plan resource. And they have some recordings of trainings that they've previously done. So now getting into the fun part of the presentation, clean energy and your comprehensive plan. So when you're starting to think about clean energy in your comprehensive plan, there's a couple things you really want to focus on in those early stages. So first, why are you planning for clean energy in your comprehensive plans? Comprehensive plans are intended to be just that, comprehensive. So clean energy and sustainability are increasingly important for New York State communities, and land use impacts have evolved over time. So it's important to reflect that in the comprehensive plan. There are a few very clear benefits for planning for clean energy. Helpful to have an articulation or representation of the jurisdiction's priorities and policies for clean energy. Helps provides clarity for all parties, including local boards, decision makers, and developers. And it also may strengthen the jurisdiction's position in the event of a legal dispute or challenge, which we discussed a bit earlier. And there's also access to grants and incentives, which I focused on a few slides ago. It's also important to think about how we are defining and understanding clean energy or sustainability. Not only renewable generators such as solar, wind, but also technologies and strategies and concepts which support clean energy and sustainability goals. So you might also want to include alternative and clean transportation, maybe residential or commercial energy efficiency initiatives. So you really want to take a broad stab at this as well. So comprehensive planning also plays a role in the permitting process for large-scale renewables, which we did cover a bit earlier. Both Article 10 and ORES require the inclusion of any applicable municipal comprehensive plan as part of a complete permit application. So this is pulled directly from that. Is that a statement as to whether any applicable local jurisdiction has adopted a comprehensive plan applicable to lands on which the facility components or ancillary facilities are located, and whether the proposed facility is consistent with such a comprehensive plan. A copy of the plan shall be provided in the application with an indication of plan sections applicable to the proposed uses. So again, this is really a great opportunity for communities to articulate its priorities, concerns, and wishes, especially in instances where the permitting might be happening at a state level. So here we have for selecting a plan format and process. So in order to get started, it's important to understand where you are starting from. So this decision tree makes a simple flow process you can follow to determine what plan format or process you need. So this is also inclusive in our guidance document, so you can check that out there as well. But first, you want to ask if your community has an existing comprehensive plan. If so, was it adopted less than 10 years ago, or does it require periodic review? If yes, you can consider amending your existing comprehensive plan to include clean energy goals and objectives. If the answer is no here, you may want to review the existing plan and decide whether a new plan or an update is appropriate. If your community does not have a comprehensive plan, you'll want to create a new comprehensive plan and also evaluate your options. Do you want your plan to contain a standalone clean energy component, or will you incorporate clean energy goals and objectives throughout your plan as appropriate? So this is really the first step you want to take into consideration on how you plan on creating or updating your comprehensive plan. So some municipalities may want to adopt a land use moratorium as they develop or update their comprehensive plan. So the moratorium is a local law suspending rights to obtain developmental approvals. The municipality may use this tool to get additional time to consider, draft, and adopt land use plans to respond to circumstances that they did not feel was adequately dealt with under its current laws, and the municipality will need to formally adopt and file a law to put this in place. It's also important to note that a moratorium must be reasonable to avoid the risk of being challenged and voided by the courts. So reasonableness is best established by the local legislative findings documenting the moratorium's necessity in light of health, safety risks, or a new land use problem that the municipality's existing regulations were not designed to handle. The more specific and legitimate the municipality's plan and timetable for the moratorium are, the more likely the moratorium will be found to be reasonable. So generally courts are differential to the local legislators' findings. However, courts will void a moratorium where there is proof of special facts showing that municipality acted unreasonably or in bad faith in adopting the moratorium. So also just of note to note, a moratorium does not apply to approved projects where the developer has completed construction or undergone substantial construction in reliance on a developmental approval or permit. And once again, the Department of State Local Government Services has additional resources and trainings regarding the land use moratorium if that's a path that your municipality is looking at. All right, so continuing on. Here we'll get into some of the steps that need to be taken. I think there's about 7 or 8 in this presentation that we will walk through, and they will also incorporate some important examples of clean energy as well. So this is the actual process for creating and adopting that clean energy component into your comprehensive plan. The first step is for the local legislative body to adopt a policy resolution or statement that asserts the overall goals of the comprehensive planning process regarding clean energy. You want to state the intention to consider clean energy development in municipal plans and regulations, and also to outline previously identified plan format and process. You know, is this a new plan starting from scratch, or are we just incorporating a new component? So this would all be included in that policy resolution. The second step we have here is looking at identifying the funding and resources that will be required. So depending where the board is at this point, this can be incorporated into the policy resolution, but it is important to consider using in-house staff as well as county and regional planning staff, volunteers, and potentially hiring consultants. This is also going to help estimate costs for this update or creation, and also do an inventory of what labor and expertise that you have at your disposal compared to what you will need to hire as consultants. So this will give you a much more realistic picture of what the process and the capability will be to create and adopt this clean energy component. And finally, you'll want to identify and apply for grant funding as available. As I've stated prior, our guidebook will give you a good head start on this component regarding funding. So next, for step 3, you'll want to identify the individuals charged with developing the plan. So now you know you're going to develop the plan, but now who's actually going to do it? So this should be a logical outgrowth of that inventory of labor and expertise from step 2. So this can also be incorporated into the resolution or statement if you've already figured this out before adopting it. So examples of who may be tasked with carrying out this work are local legislatures, planning boards, maybe a special committee. You could, if you have a clean energy task force, that would be a good example of this as well. The overarching idea here is to ensure that the individuals are educated enough on clean energy programs, goals, and technologies. This does not mean they have to be clean energy experts and know every program in New York, because I know I sure do not know that. But you want to make sure that they have some level of expertise relative to the community and are also interested in this. This is also important because these are the people who will be tasked with determining the existing conditions in the community as outlined in step 4. So here we've got a host of existing conditions on the right side of the screen to go through. First is the energy and grid considerations. We'll do a deeper dive on this one in the next few slides, so I'm just going to skip it at this point. Next, we have the agricultural considerations, which is definitely a big one in upstate New York, but also statewide. So you'll want to identify the soil types and qualities in your jurisdiction. Where is the prime farmland or the farmland of statewide importance? Where mineral soil groups 1 through 4 may be. So you'll also want to know where they are, how much of it there is, what zoning districts are they in. So all of this will be really important to gather while developing this plan. We also have environmental considerations here. So like endangered or sensitive species, wetlands, we want to know where they are to be able to make sure that clean energy development does not interfere with what already lives here and what already exists. And the last example we have here on this slide is the socioeconomic considerations. So as part of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, it mandates that at least 35% of benefits from clean energy go to what's been termed as disadvantaged communities in the law. So if that is important to your particular municipality, it can be very advantageous to have an understanding of where your environmental justice communities are, what do they care about, what would they like to see. It's important to engage them in the planning process to better serve their needs and contribute to state goals. So really you're taking an inventory of what sort of resources do you have in your jurisdiction and what is important, so you can kind of think about that going forward in your comprehensive planning. So as promised, here we have an example that I mentioned prior as part of the determining existing conditions. So the utilities have publicly available hosting capacity maps. So these can help you visualize your local energy distribution infrastructure and also identify general potential locations for clean energy development based on the proximity to the grid. So you have here on your right-hand side with all the fun colors, that's the hosting capacity map from the utility. It's also important to note this isn't as important for residential installations as they don't need to connect to the three-phase. But this will definitely come into consideration for commercial or community solar ground-mounted systems, as those are usually larger capacity systems. And when you're looking at these sort of hosting capacity maps, it's important to note that these projects usually have to be within a half mile to these lines, as it's extremely expensive to run the three-phase lines much further than that and may make the project uneconomical. These projects will also show you the grid hosting capacity, basically how much solar the grid can be connected to on that line. The red lines are representative of lines that are already to capacity, but the blue lines here show there is still some available capacity for interconnection. So you can run this analysis for your town specifically. I'm also happy to help you do so afterwards. I'll have my contact information. I'm so happy to walk through your town on this as well. I'll also note, just because a line shows that there is not more available capacity does not mean that a clean energy project will never occur there, but that it will be probably really expensive to build and expand that capacity. So solar developers are responsible for interconnection costs. So basically a utility will never say, no, you can't install here because the capacity is full. They'll just tell you how much, and that much will probably be too expensive for them to move forward with the project. I'll also note that these capacities are not fixed and they may change over time, but it's definitely a good jumping off point to just get a general understanding of where development may occur in your community. I believe the utilities are required to update these on a quarterly basis. And then also continuing on this, you can use these maps to see how the distribution lines align with your existing zoning districts and also compare with your land uses close to them. And I'll also share a link in the chat that you can use to get to these hosting capacity maps for your jurisdiction. So when you're looking at the hosting capacity maps, distribution lines are step one in determining existing conditions. You can continue with this mapping exercise by layering the high voltage transmission lines, which will help you do a similar general planning and understanding of feasibility for those large scale renewable projects. Next, we recommend layering in your existing municipal zoning map to get a sense of how existing zoning may sync up with, grid infrastructure and capacity. And by doing that, you'll be able to identify priority zoning districts or pockets where you can anticipate clean energy development, which you can see here on the screen, these 2 pockets over here. Basically, those circles, these align with areas with available hosting capacity and transmission lines, and also show what districts they can expect development in. I'll also note that you don't have to go into this level of detail when doing your comprehensive plan, but it does help you to determine your existing conditions and help guide your planning. I see we have another question about what about soil and wetland layers? Yeah, that's definitely something else you can include as well. I think that would fall kind of into our environmental considerations. We were just looking at the energy and grid, but you can also take those additional layers and incorporate them into your, basically as you're planning, and overlay those to see. I know it might not be as applicable to this group on the phone currently, but Scenic Hudson had put together this solar mapping tool, which actually takes a bunch of, they've basically compiled a bunch of different layers of GIS data for, those different considerations across the state, and made this pretty cool map. I think, I don't know if they're looking to expand it statewide, but I know it's something that we're looking at as well. So this can just give you a kind of an idea of what some other communities are doing across the state. All right, so now we're at step 5. So designing an effective public outreach and education campaign, basically. We've got an example of what some outreach might look like. I imagine the outreach could look very similar to the outreach that got you in this Zoom room tonight, but just replace comprehensive plan training with comprehensive plan meeting. It really can be that simple if you'd like, but it's really important to gather input from a wide range of diverse stakeholders for clean energy. You may also want to target utility representatives, environmental groups, nonprofits in the area, and also your community members as well. So gathering all that information and hearing all those different perspectives is going to allow you to formulate community concerns and priorities, which for planning, it's one of those things where if you do this work up front, it'll save you a lot of stress and hopefully headaches down the line, rather than waiting for something to become a problem and hearing from everyone. So if you can hear from everyone first and hopefully prevent the problem from happening, or at least prevent it from the extent practicable. So we really want you to include questions and opportunities focused on feedback regarding sustainability and clean energy. It also might be worthwhile to have a mix of in-person and online public engagement sessions, as virtual meetings definitely seem to have increased the attendance and can get more people in the room. And then finally, you're going to start creating your clean energy content for your plan. This is also the shortest bullet because we've already done a lot of the work, and you're going to synthesize that work and build it into a coherent component for the comprehensive plan. So once that information has been compiled and you have a final draft that's been approved by all who needs to approve it, you'll be ready to make it official. So you'll have to complete the legally required process, which consists of a referral of the approved plan by whoever that committee was. So if it was a special board or the planning board or whoever, they'll have to refer to the local legislator. And there will have to be at least 2 public hearings then legally for this piece. But hopefully, since you've done a lot of this legwork up front with public meetings up to this point, it would go rather smoothly. There will have to be a seeker review, the state environmental quality review for those who are not familiar, and if needed, an agricultural review. And finally, establish terms for a periodic review and update. So building that into the timeline for reassessment is also really important. And lastly, you'll want to publicize and get the plan out and implement it itself. So here we really covered the process for incorporating clean energy into your comprehensive plan. So now we're going to move a bit more into some details about goals and objectives for clean energy and your comprehensive plan. So as you start creating your clean energy content, you really need to take into consideration your community's goals and objectives. We're going to start a little high level here and drill down a bit more specifically into this. So these should reflect information gathered from your existing condition studies, from the public engagement. And here we're looking at goals as longer term and more broadly based, and then objectives which lay out intentions which support these goals and are more specifically focused. So we have some sample goals and objectives for clean energy on the slide. So a goal could really be as broad as to support the transition towards clean energy sources. And some of the objectives that can be included in the plan to support this goal could be to allow and incentivize individuals and businesses to use renewable energy and undertake energy efficiency initiatives, or to support the expansion of clean energy opportunities through the town's land use policies, plans, and regulations, or even streamline the project review and approval processes so that is efficient and predictable. So really the goal is that higher level of what we want to do, and the objective is the first step of how can we do this. So we have another sample goal here, which is to balance clean energy development and continued agricultural operations. This is definitely a big one in New York. So here you can also incorporate this goal into your comprehensive plan to acknowledge the importance of both solar and agriculture. And you can have the following objectives in this regard. So, you want to balance clean energy and ag, but your objective is also to allow clean energy projects in priority agricultural areas only if mitigation for the ag impacts have been identified and addressed. Another objective could be to encourage solar and other renewable energy production that is compatible with agricultural related businesses. And a last example we have is to prioritize balanced siting of clean energy projects on priority farmland identified for protection. So these two kind of goals and with their subsequent objective we just went through is really just some samples of what a goal could look like for your community when it comes to clean energy. So like I said, we just highlighted two specific goals on the prior slides. And here we have a few other examples of goals that you can consider while developing clean energy content. So this might also be to achieving financial, socioeconomic, and other benefits associated with economic development, preventing, mitigating, or adapting to impacts of climate change, or aligning with New York State goals, policies, and programs on climate and clean energy. So they really can be as broad as you would like, but just kind of sets the footprint of what this clean energy content is going to look like in your plan. So as we continue working through this, we have goals, and then we've already drilled down to objectives. And if we drill down again, we have the strategies. Now, these strategies offer specific policies or actions that support the selected goals and objectives, and also need to reflect the resources, programs, and assistance available to municipalities. So working off the example on the screen, if we stick with the goal of supporting the transition to clean energy sources, it's a pretty broad goal, so harder to get any broader than that. And then we see the objectives that we've already discussed on the previous slide. So looking at the first objective about allowing and incentivizing renewable generation energy efficiency initiatives, a strategy here could be to offer real property tax 487 tax exemption for clean energy systems. So, if your residents or businesses want to go solar, having that exemption in place would mean they don't have to pay real property tax on the added value of that system. So that would help support the transition towards clean energy sources and also fall under the objective of incentivizing individuals and businesses to use renewable energy. So the next objective that we have here is the one to support the expansion of clean energy opportunities through the town's land use policies. So here, a strategy could be to amend the local zoning to reflect a balanced approach to clean energy. It might be to utilize and modify the NYSERDA clean energy laws that we have part of our clean energy guidebooks, or potentially adopting the New York Stretch Energy Code. And for the last objective, to streamline the project review and approval processes, maybe the strategy here is to utilize a clean energy specific permit and inspection processes. We have the unified solar permit as part of our solar guidebook, or maybe the strategy is to digitize the permit applications and fee payments. So those are just a few strategies that could support the objectives and the goal here of transitioning towards clean energy sources. And once again, these are really just examples to give you an idea how you can incorporate clean energy into your comprehensive plan. So continuing on a similar conversation, I guess, we'll do another goal, objective, and strategies. So here we have the goal for balancing clean energy development and continued agricultural operations. So for the first one, for the objective about allowing clean energy projects in priority ag areas only if mitigation for ag impacts have been identified and addressed. The strategy here could just be to amend the local zoning requirements to identify and require adherence to town's preferred mitigation strategies. This could be adherence to the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets construction guidelines for solar on agricultural lands, or maybe there's some other mitigation strategy that is important to the town that they could put here. Or the next objective, to encourage solar and other renewable energy production that is compatible with ag-related businesses. So maybe here the strategy would be to amend the local zoning requirements to encourage the co-location of renewables and agricultural activities or land uses. That's kind of referring a bit more to what's called agrivoltaics, basically having ag and solar on the same parcel, which is still a bit in the early stages of development, but starting to see a little more uptick. And then the next objective regarding just prioritize balanced siting of clean energy projects on farmland for protection. So as a strategy here, you can identify specific soil categories and or physical areas for prioritization while considering historic and current land uses, ensure alignment with local zoning or other land use policies, amend the local zoning to guide clean energy development to alternative parcels or locations, basically away from priority soils. So once again, these are just a few kind of ideas of strategies of how you might meet these objectives and goals. So now we're getting close to the end of the presentation. So here we're going to talk a little bit about implementation plans. So this will help create a clear picture of what is going to happen and who's going to do it and when in your comprehensive plan. It will need to also designate responsibilities, identify the resources, and clarify timelines for some of the selected goals, objectives, and strategies. They can also serve as a roadmap to ensure your comprehensive plan components are completed and not forgotten. So we've got an implementation plan here for the clean energy goal on the bottom of the slide. So again, sticking with that broad goal of supporting the transition towards clean energy sources, the objective of streamlining that project review. The strategy here, as an example, is to adopt the unified solar permit. And then you have the responsible party as well. So the town board would be the responsible party who would have to pass the resolution to adopt the permit. And then you have the building inspector or the code enforcement officer who will be responsible for handling and enforcing those permits. And then you have the resources. So basically, what resources are available to make this happen and what's necessary. So for this one specifically, you could identify the Unified Solar Permit Toolkit that we have as part of the Solar Guidebook. And it's also a high impact action for the Clean Energy Communities program as well. So there's also available technical assistance from the siting team and from the Clean Energy Communities coordinators. And then lastly, when are we going to do this? So you'll have to select a time frame for this to happen. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 9 months, maybe it's a year. It's just really taking into consideration your community and what is going to be an appropriate timeline for this to happen. So as you can also see, these implementation plans create a really clear plan of what the goal is and the roadmap of how this will be met as part of your comprehensive plan. So we'll go through a few more of these just to lay out some additional examples. So here for goal number 2, you have promote clean energy technologies. So maybe the objective here is the opportunity for municipal buildings and schools to use renewable energy. So the strategy could be to adopt benchmarking policy for the municipal facilities, and who would be responsible for this? The legislature and the administrative staff, to ensure that they're complying on it for the buildings. And then there's also what's the resource, what's available. There's technical and program assistance from NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities program, and also incorporate a timeline for this to be done. So the next goal we have here would be to support financial strategies that further clean energy development and decrease the cost of electricity. The objective might be to support residential and commercial clean energy projects through regulations and taxation policies. So the strategy here is to ensure that RPTL 4A7 tax exemption remains in place. Who's responsible here? It would be the municipal legislature again, as well as the assessor, to ensure that they're enacting that properly. And then for resources, we also have the Solar Guidebook, which has some section on 4A7. And then there's also the Department of Tax and Finance that has some resources as well. And then once again, determining a time period for this to be incorporated. And then the last goal we have here on this screen is to increase clean energy related employment, business deployment, and training opportunities. So again, just a very high level goal. The objective here is to encourage the development of education and training programs for clean energy employment. The strategy might be to partner with local clean energy businesses to create paid internships and training opportunities. And then the responsible party might be the municipal staff who is managing this process alongside with the local businesses that may sign up to be a part of it. And then for your resources, there might be able to turn to your local and regional planning agencies. And then there is a NYSERDA Clean Energy Internship Program that could be used as well. And then once again, you're determining the time period for that. So like I said, these implementation plans are really good roadmaps in your comprehensive plan to ensure that you have a goal, an objective, and a strategy, and really a timeline to meet that, and who's going to help you meet those goals. So continuing, we're really at the end of the presentation. We gave you a good overview of clean energy in New York State, comprehensive planning, and then different ideas of how to incorporate a clean energy component into your comprehensive plan. As promised, here are some resources that would definitely be helpful while looking at this. So like I said, the New York State Department of State Division of Local Government Services, they have their own zoning and the comprehensive plan guide and guides to planning and zoning. Syracuse University has a good New York State comprehensive plan development resource as well. And then there's the solar guidebook as well as the energy storage guidebook. The American Planning Association has some best practices that are helpful for comprehensive plans. And then the New York State Climate Smart Communities also has resources for comprehensive plan with sustainability elements. And then lastly, which I think I've talked about a few times at this point tonight, is the funding for these projects. I can't get my laser pointer to turn off. So with that, you're able to see where you're able to get different funding and technical assistance. So you might be able to look at your local, county, or regional planning agencies. New York State has some resources and programs that you can look to utilize as well. And that's really all I have for you guys tonight. So basically, thanks for letting me give you this presentation overviewing our clean energy and your comprehensive plan guidance document, which I shared the link earlier, like I said, but also feel free to send us emails, questions, request technical assistance at cleanenergyhelp@nyserda.ny.gov. That goes directly to my inbox as well as my other team members. So even if you have questions that might not be clean energy and comprehensive plan related and just more general regarding storage, wind, solar, laws, tax, really anything, feel free to just send us an email there and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And like I said, if we don't know the answer, you're probably not the only one asking for it. So it's good for us to kind of get ahead of that and learn more too with you if there's something that our resources aren't already covering. And with that, I'll pass it over to Nancy, as I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, though feel free to send them in, and also included here the upcoming training. So Nancy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Candace. Yeah, just for everybody's reference, Candace has the next sessions of the series up on the screen. I wanted to just remind you that if you haven't registered for one of the additional sessions, you won't receive the new meeting links. There are unique meeting links, Zoom links for each session. So if you want to attend one of the other ones, then and you didn't already register, please do so. Again, the same link to register, but what you'll get is a different link to log on. And you should have my name and email address and any of the correspondence. You can always just reach out to me directly if you have a problem. But there is still time, plenty of time for questions. If you're not comfortable using the chat to ask, I think we're a small enough group that you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. This is your chance to have Candace's full attention, even though, as she mentioned, she's available anytime that you do have a question as well.
Also, as you can tell, I forgot to turn my light on and it's now dark out. So my room is rather dark and only being illuminated by my presentation.
No questions, right?
Hey, Nancy, Rick Nugent from Town 3. So just to confirm, I signed up for all 5 classes today. Do I have to sign back up again?
No, you don't. If you signed up for all 5 classes, then you will be receiving additional emails with with links, the meeting link, the Zoom link for the next session and for each session. So just look for those emails. You're all set. And please, if you have any of your colleagues or friends and other communities, if you think they might be interested in these sessions, please pass along the registration email, and happy to get them signed up. If anybody knows anybody in that situation, other folks on your planning board, zoning boards, or whatnot, code officers. I think there was a question in the chat. Candace, is that right?
Yeah, so I see here someone asked that, so I cited Article 10, but what's the source documentation for this? So Article 10 was how these large scale renewable projects were permitted before the Office of Renewable Energy Siting was stood up. So most of those large projects that you see now, the ones that are over 20, 25 megawatts and larger, are all going through ORES now instead of Article 10. Though I do think there's a few legacy projects of renewable energy going through Article 10. So we kind of include it to just make people aware. And I also just threw in the chat just a link to some resources on our website that talks about Article 10 if you want to look a bit more into it. But at this point, we've largely transitioned over to the permitting process through ORAs.
Anything else from anybody? Well, if that's it, then Candace, oh, no, we have another question. Good. Keep it coming.
That one's for you.
Oh,
Would it
is
be
it?
possible
Oh,
to share the link to sign up for the rest of the courses here in the chat?
that's an excellent idea. Give me a second. Got to find it. I think I found it, and I hope that it oh, did somebody else put it in there? Oh, somebody's a lot faster than I am. But that looks about right, so thank you.
I also see there's another question if we'll be sharing the link to this recording in the slide deck. I'm happy to share the slides, and I'm assuming the recording will be shared as well.
That's right, Candace, if you want to send it to me, I will, when we get the recording all set and post it on YouTube so everybody can watch it, I'll send out both to everybody that registered for this session.
Perfect.
Well, if there's nothing else, then I think we can wrap things up. And thank you, everybody, for attending. We hope you see you at a future session, and good luck. And I should also thank you for all the work that you do in your communities. It's greatly appreciated, and we all benefit from it. So thanks again, and hope to see you at another session.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.